So do you kick off, John or Maggie, or should I just begin?
You go for it.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Well, I'm a little congested today, but otherwise it's a nice day in Oswego, wherever you are watching this. So I'm recording from the CELT room in Penfield Library. It looks like we have a good crowd in on the virtual session too. But for those who don't know me, I'm Josh McKeown. I'm the Associate Provost for International Education. I'm joined by Megan Kropf, who's in the Office of International Education and Programs. She's our Senior Operations Administrator and has been the person really, I think, working most closely with faculty on developing as well as administering their programs. We'll tell you a little bit about what it's been like, at least for the past 12 months. We'll probably harken a little bit back to how things were before COVID, in the before times. But we also really are focusing on this coming year and what we do to develop new programs, but importantly, and I see some new faces in this room and on the Zoom as well, getting new faculty involved as well, or faculty who have maybe been involved with other aspects of our work, but to actually propose and lead programs. Okay, next slide. All right, so I'm going to briefly talk about last year. I think we've delivered this session since COVID, and if you were with us last year, you saw, an image of a burning train car hurtling into 2022, and we decided to drop that slide from the presentation. But really, it was a good year. I say reasonably successful only because I have a lot of expectations of myself, of us, and I also know what we have as an institution have been able to do with international programs over the 20 or so years that I've been here, and really for a generation before that. We think big and we do big things at Oswego. We go big places. At least we did before COVID, but we did have a 2-year pause, and there's just no other way to say it than that. We had a 2-year pause mandated by SUNY, but also just by the realities of the world. So reasonable success for us, as Megan pulled some numbers together, we had 33 students go abroad on quarter courses, and we'll talk a little bit about the different program models today too, for those who don't know or need refreshing. We had 18, these are all faculty-led programs, okay? 33 last spring, 18 in the summer. That's, more or less 50 or so students. In a great year in the past, we had 150 go on faculty-led programs alone. And in a great year before COVID, we had 500 or so study abroad through my office. All right, so that's what I mean by scale. So 50 or so, I think, was a great start, but it's still relatively small-ish and building back. We'll talk about the second bullet there about some SUNY is other kind of restrictions on us, and we're going to go through the how do we work with them will be the approach, not do we work with them, and that's really exciting because we're looking forward to really building and growing. So for the most part last year, we worked with faculty who had worked with us before, but the programs themselves were varied. We had some traditional programs, I would say, to traditional locations like in Italy. Ben Etner and Rick Metzger joined that project. But we also went to Tanzania with the biology faculty. Karen Syme and Kamal Muhammad led a great field program. So we went, pretty far away as well, just on a smaller scale. This year, we are actively looking for new faculty, new locations, but within, I hope I'm getting this point across, within the constraints of kind of we're still building back, okay? So what program types and models do we have? I think at Oswego, it's fair to say we got really good at using the academic calendar in its entirety. So study abroad or education abroad was not just within the semesters or summers. It really became something that a student could do and a faculty member could lead at almost any point during the academic year. So the models that we have, we call them our Q programs or quarter programs. We've worked with quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. We've not yet started to work with quarter 1, although I must tell you the week-long Thanksgiving break is calling out to me for something creative to do even in quarter 1, but we'll see. So the way the quarter program model works is the instructor teaches a quarter course, obviously, Typically, though, it is extra service or beyond their regular service. It does not have to be. In fact, when a course is taught as part of regular service, that is a good thing for the cost, to keep the program costs down, because we're not paying the instructor extra service. But importantly to note for the quarter courses, and by the way, Megan, if you want to jump in anytime to amplify or clarify or correct me, as the case may be, please do, okay? But with the quarter course model, the course is set up so that every student taking that course is also going abroad. They're not taking the course unless they know ahead of time that they're going abroad. They understand what the costs are, they understand what the commitment is, and they sign up for the course and are registered for the program with that in mind. So it's a cohort model. Everyone in that Q classroom, whether it's online or in person, is going abroad. And that could happen in January after Q2, March spring break after Q3, or May, preferably early summer for Q4. Then we have the semester course with optional travel. That is done much less frequently, but it's a really nice model. It's a flexible model, and it allows for a student to go on a program and be encouraged to do so by their professor or their instructor right then, real time in that semester. For example, if the optional course or the semester course with optional travel is in the spring, a student signs up for, say, GLS 200 that I teach. And they may not even know about the travel abroad option until they start that course. If we market it and promote effectively, they would, but say they don't. When they start taking the course, the professor has a chance to announce it, really encourage students to think about how this trip would fit into their course that they're currently taking, and they sign up based on that. Both the quarter and the semester model, what they have in common is the travel is short, about a week. So when it's spring break, it has to be a week. But the quarter 2 and quarter 4 models, they could be as 2 or 3 weeks potentially, but that does add to cost, and that's one of the considerations. But regardless, those are all short programs. So the semester course with optional travel similarly is short, say a week or so after the course. We also have summer and winter session courses. In fact, we have one going right now in Australia with Elizabeth Kita from the Health Promotion and Wellness Department is leading our first faculty-led trip to Australia using winter session. And there are faculty who teach abroad for us in the summer at some of our summer locations. Interestingly, in the last couple of years, we've really started to see interest in online programs. So if you're teaching online predominantly, you can still take part in this. And then I call domestic international programs on a very limited basis, especially when international travel was either restricted entirely or just formidable. We have had some good proposals for faculty interested in doing things in the United States, I would say of an international nature, say to Hawaii or New York City, and you can imagine other locations as well. So those are on the table now too, and students have responded pretty favorably to those.
One thing I wanted to add to that is the quarter courses and the semester courses with optional travel, the academic component of those are held at Oswego or they're held online, but they're Oswego courses, whereas the summer and winter session, the academic component is held overseas. So that's one thing that differentiates those options.
Yeah, really good point. And we can talk individually with any faculty member or instructor who submits a proposal, which we'll talk about in a second. Can you advance the slide, Megan? Okay, I want to go over this briefly for everyone's sort of updating. And my guess is this is going to mirror a lot of what you're seeing in classroom and on campus as well. So what has changed since COVID? And we really saw this play out last year. Students still have a lot of uncertainties. I might add anxieties, but I'm not really trained to say that word, clinically, but it seems to me there's a lot of uncertainties in students' minds about a lot of things. And so when they're considering, going abroad, students always had a lot of questions. We're seeing a lot of questions, very particular ones. Engagement and focus issues, I know that is something that everyone is facing, but for us, the concerns that students have are not always rational. And I mean that in a sense that a student might be worried, say, about the war in Ukraine. And this came up in, as a real example last year. And they decide to drop out of the Paris program because of it. And you think about that, what is the connection there? There may not be really a clear connection, but the student's worried about something. All right, so when you add pandemic and you add war and inflationary concerns. There's a lot of concern out there, and we are seeing it play out, and it's not always really clear, including about entry requirements. Those have largely settled down now. There's still some issues with entry, but other than China itself, which very recently has reopened, all of our program locations are open. But as far as what's required of the student, those are still kind of, in some cases, in a COVID mindset, but largely at least the more popular locations where we have gone, they are open, but students may not know that. They may not know what airlines are requiring or entry requirements are. The implications for us more than ever is to be clear. And we've always tried to be really clear with students about what's included in a program, what is not, what it costs, what are the variables, but exceeding clarity is really what we need right now. What to the nth detail, what is the program going to be, to present it that way, to present it in an organized manner, and to communicate that to students in a way that they can understand. And usually that means multiple methods, okay? And even then, they still just may not, right? And I know we're all experiencing that as educators more broadly, but for us, when it involves travel, clarity and to the best we can, following the plan consistently is really, really important. The second bullet there, we try to watch out right now. We are watching out for too many what if scenarios. And during COVID and the early aftermath of coming out of COVID, there still were a number of what ifs. What if I get to Paris and I have to quarantine? What if, where would I stay if? Okay, we're seeing fewer of those now, okay? And our encouragement, therefore, with faculty is when you're putting together a proposal, an itinerary, we're really going to try to minimize those, almost to the extent of less is more. If we don't know for sure if you're going somewhere, maybe we err on the side of knowing what we can do and be clear. And if there's a great positive change and, oh wow, we also get to do this, let that be a positively received add-on rather than, I'm not sure we'll get to do this or not, or I'm not sure where you're going to be staying. I'm not sure how many students are going to be sharing a room or not. Those kinds of things are really not being well received by students right now. And be in tune with shifting conditions. If something does change, right now we're not so worried about entry requirements, but it's about flight costs. They are shifting in a bad way. So we're taking some steps in our office. For example, that Australia program that went off in January successfully with 10 students, when it came time for students to buy flights, and we realized that the flight cost to Australia was significantly higher than what we had estimated. We went back and rechecked with every single student. Do you still plan to go if the flight cost is $1,000 higher, which is what it was than anticipated? Okay, so those are right now the shifting conditions, and so we have to be mindful. Thankfully, not so much COVID related. Internal process, what has changed? So one thing that's still the case, but I don't want to overemphasize this, is it used to be that SUNY Oswego, we ran our own shop, and everything that was needed in terms of approvals to go abroad was handled here, almost entirely in my office, or it would end with me, obviously, to the provost and president's offices as needed, but it was a local decision. Since COVID, it's now SUNY has to approve every program we run. Now, in theory, they always did. Okay, so that's why I don't want to overdo this or over worry. And what we are told by SUNY is, as long as you're organized, which Oswego is, and you're experienced and competently led, which thankfully we have Megan, we are, we're not, no. Oswego's in a good position, really. In fact, SUNY has told us that offline, that when they get a proposal from Oswego, they don't worry. Why? We're well led, we're well managed, we're experienced. We're not going to propose a program that's not safe and strong to run. But I do want to mention that SUNY does have some greater involvement, including some forms and things like that they want students to do. Nothing we can't handle, though. The second internal process I think that's worth mentioning is contingency scenario planning, including academic contingency. So we have to start, actively imagining, what if the trip doesn't go? How will students achieve the academic objective and get a grade? We have to talk about that now, because we did experience that vividly in the spring of 2020. Travel problems, we mentioned entry and exit, flight availability, restriction and cost. That's the big one, like I'm saying right now. And no matter how many travel agents we check, there's no great deal to be had out there right now. 5 local restrictions or location restrictions and contraction of study abroad industry. That's sort of an inside baseball kind of comment, but what it means is that there's a lot of I guess, provider consolidation and kind of pullback. The same kinds of needs for certainty and cost concerns that I just expressed. Every person involved with, I guess, the entire travel industry, but at least the education abroad industry is feeling the same thing. So there may be fewer choices. There may be certain things you want to do that maybe have to do a little bit different way because of what's realistically obtainable. Like I say, make no assumptions as we start planning. Megan, do you want to amplify anything about that regarding the program providers or the flights we're dealing with?
One thing that we noticed in 2020 that we went through is just trying to recoup money so that we could refund students. So I think moving forward, it's preferable that we work with these partner providers just to make it more streamlined, for us, and just so that, students and parents have more security in knowing that we have on the ground support while their students are overseas.
That's a great point. And really the nuts and bolts of it is if we organize the program entirely from Oswego and my office, chances are we're paying bills in advance for things. And as Megan alluded to, we actually had to work hard to try to get some of that money back in spring 2020, didn't get all of it back. Whereas when you deal with an organization, a provider, or a university, say, you tend to work these things out in advance. And maybe there's credit towards a future trip that you can rely on instead of just losing it. So yeah, good point, Megan. Okay, we got 6 post-COVID processes we wanted to talk about. Hey, Megan, I guess we'll start with the faculty staffing per trip and have a brief discussion about it. Again, bear with us as things shift, but coming out of COVID, really the first program was last January, but probably 6 months before that, planning it. I had decided that given the situation that it made sense to have 2 faculty, staff, travelers per program. Really, because if there was a quarantine issue, and if a student had to be tended to, whether they were sick or not. The truth is we've always had students get sick. We've always had students who needed medical attention. That itself isn't new, but the restrictions on us and really the expectations had changed. But heading into the following year, I don't intend to mandate that there be 2. Instead, it's going to be a discussion. So if a program, I mentioned the program to Tanzania, the way Kamal and Karen run that program, 2 are really required. First of all, academically, we have a botanist and a zoologist going. That's important. But also it's a field program, their own vehicles. It's good to have people share that responsibility. Or if a program is large, if a program has 15, 18 or more students, that's usually the threshold I've used. Just for basic supervision issues, it's good to have more than 1. But if we have a program with 8 students going to a major European city that has good infrastructure and fairly predictable situation, arguably 2 is overkill. Okay. So it's that kind of discussion that we're going to have this year. What are you proposing to do? Where are you proposing to go? How is it that, 2 people would be needed? We have a bio program that's in the water, and there are basic water safety ratios we have to follow, right? So there are definitely going to be issues that come up, but it won't be mandated is my point. SUNY's not mandating it, so I'm not mandating it going forward next year to have more than 1. Number 2, expanded proposal information process. You're going to see, and I think Megan will walk you through in a minute what the proposal process looks like. She did a really good job. It's now on a Google Doc through Google Form. It's really user-friendly, not the Teradata system we used before. But you'll see in there, we're asking questions that may seem a little too detailed when you're just beginning. That's okay. We'll work with you, but just know everything we're asking, we have to put in a proposal to SUNY to get this program approved technically. Okay. So there are reasons why we're asking for it, but often up front, faculty don't know exactly 100% what they're going to do in advance. That's okay. We'll still work with you on that, but everything we're asking is for a reason. Group flight structure. This is a big one. For those of you who remember the programs before, the faculty-led programs always had a flight built into the program cost. We no longer do that. It has been impossible really to project flight costs. If things settle down to the point where we can be somewhat predictable in the future and build that in, we'll do that again. But right now it is such a gamble, and it really is, in the sense that if we build a program fee, say in July for a program that's not running until March or May, and it may not be viable to reserve seats in advance for a whole host of reasons, we're end up buying tickets that may be, as I suggested earlier, really out of line with what we've collected. So what we're doing instead is estimating flight costs like we do with semester programs and summer programs, same exact method. We're estimating flight costs. When it comes time to purchase, if it is somehow extreme, we will double back and check in with students like we did in that Australia example. Say, are we still good to go, folks? It's higher than we expected. So we're not assuming that risk as an institution, and nor are we making the student be on the hook for that risk. If something's changed and say that flight is $1,000 higher than it was, there'll be a chance to pull out. So part of the proposal process is learning that from us and then really keeping in touch over the course of the time between when the proposal is accepted and when the program runs to stay on top of the flight costs. Megan, is that fairly said?
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Okay. Build in flexible itineraries as needed. So that's the nuanced approach there. We want a clear itinerary. We want as few uncertainties as possible. But if there is something that you absolutely need to do, and you know that there may be a chance, please be thinking about an alternate scenario. Doesn't mean we project out to students that we have all of these variables. You know, if you're going to go to London and your intent was to visit the Houses of Parliament, well, if they're closed that day, what are you going to do? Instead, a backup might be having a guest speaker come from either Parliament, and our provider could help arrange that. So it's sort of mentally being agile to know that some place that you're intending to go may have a restriction or maybe locked down, and what are you going to do instead? So it does behoove you to have some flexible itinerary, but again, we don't want to project out to students that we don't have a plan. And we can talk more if people have questions about sort of the subtleties of that. Budget for 8. Okay. So what we had to look at very candidly coming out of COVID is what would the market here, the student market for education abroad, really accept? And I think we were right, more or less. I mean, how many did you and Ben have go to Italy with you, Rick, in the end?
So we had 12.
12, that's a good number. But we probably budgeted for 8 to be on the safe side. What we're seeing this year, you know, one of our major and veteran faculty leaders got 8 to a major city in Europe. I think, Megan, we have, I think 13 going to Italy over Q3, 12 in Q4. So we're seeing good numbers, but not, you know, in the past we had 25 or more going to Rome, for example. You know, we're not quite seeing that. So when we plan for programs, we'll start with 8. And that's also the number, as you know, that extended learning uses for winter and summer teaching to be a full course for getting your, you know, your full salary for that course. So we're going to use that number. We do also use that same sliding scale. So if for some reason you only get 4 or 5 and we can make the budget work, we're willing to run programs with less than 8, very similarly as summer and winter session approach. But I want to say too, if you're confident that your program can do well, feel free to tell us that. One of our faculty this year, who has led programs for many years, said, no, I'll get more than 8. And we said to that, well, it means if you don't, you know, we're going to budget for 12 or 15. If you don't get that number, it may mean that the program doesn't run. He was confident, he got them. All right. So we can still budget for higher. And for those who haven't done this, the higher number of students we get, obviously the per student cost rather is lower. So it does help the students. Vaccine information, we're following the same policies as the institution overall. And we have a method, very easy method for collecting vaccine information. It is not something that is really even an issue anymore for us. We've always collected medical information. It's just one more thing we're doing. Okay, we should probably just allude to these things, say, Megan, just in the interest of time, but we do consult, you know, we're no longer kind of waiting for the state to give us the okay on everything. We'd just have to check in on program proposals. For a time we were, but we still do. And I encourage all faculty, look at this, look at CDC, look at State Department, look at World Health Organization, know the location you're intending to go. Keep yourself informed so you can help keep students informed, and we consult these as well. There are some particular COVID-19 acknowledgement and risk forms that we're still doing. They seem a little bit, at this point, you know, maybe not quite as essential as they were a year or so ago, but SUNY is still requiring them. I mentioned that students and staff also, faculty staff who are going on programs have to be vaccinated per SUNY. And we house that information. Megan, you want to talk about anything in particular here you think deserves more time and focus?
One thing I just want to say is that these are the resources that we give to students, and we try to stay out of the weeds as much as possible when advising students about, vaccines that are, maybe optional that they could get to go to their destination countries. We really mostly focus on what's required for entry, and we encourage faculty to, know what's required for entry and not get too in the weeds with students about getting optional, shots. We're talking about maybe yellow fever, things like that. We just want to be mindful of.
Yeah, there are places in the world that require a yellow fever vaccination, for example. When it's required, we pass that requirement on, but we try to avoid recommendations like that. Okay, what if and what happens next? I guess this is just a way to share. We have always had an emergency plan. Really, it's an emergency communication response plan. It's current, it's revised, it's updated. We've stayed on top of it, and every faculty member leading a group will get that. So, and we'll have had at least one, probably more meetings and discussions with me and Megan. So we keep the lines of communication open, and it's a way for you to know also you're not alone. When you do take a group abroad, we are here behind you. The institution is behind you. And most likely some sort of program provider or site partner, the fourth bullet there, will be with you too. And that's part of the program development process. Who am I working with? It may be an entity that my office knows and has worked with for many years. It may be a new one. It may be one that you know. And we can talk about how to make that kind of more of an institutional relationship. But having that on the ground support is really helpful too. There are cases when it isn't necessary for a variety of reasons. And if you really know your location and it's really a place that you're familiar with, comfortable with, without a site partner or a program provider, and we discuss that in advance, that's permissible as well. But we need to know probably a lot more from you about your knowledge of and familiarity with that place than we would if we had a program partner on the ground. And I mentioned 5, too much uncertainty, flexibility causes stress. I think we covered that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to shift it to Megan because this is the proposal process, but this is our main website. And there's a faculty information resources section. On there is also the faculty international travel grant section, which is back live. We are, for those who remember that process, my office for years received annually proposals from faculty to travel abroad. We used to be pretty open about the purpose. It could have been for research purposes, even conference attendance and so forth. That is changed since COVID. And just the limited funding that we have, we are really focusing the travel grant program on program development. New program development. If you've run a program before, or I was chatting with Maggie before this program today started, if she wants to restart her Scandinavia criminal justice program and needs to go check things out, it hasn't been there in 3 years, I understand that. That would be a legitimate use for a travel grant to update or revise program proposals. Megan, you want to take it?
Sure, thank you. So this is our front page of our website. So if you go to oswego.edu/international, this is what you're going to land on. And if you're ready to go start looking through what the proposal looks like, or you're interested in the travel grant that Josh just referenced, you would go to this site and click on faculty information and resources. It's circled there in red. Once you click on that, you're going to come to this next page. And this is where you can find the travel grant link and the proposal link. So they're stored here in the same spot. They're both Google Forms. To make it simple, since we're Google Campus, I just figured that made the most sense. So when you click on the link, it'll just bring you to the form. And then you would just complete that, and I would get a notification that it's been completed. Once you complete the form, I would review it, reach out if I had any questions. I review them with Josh, and then that's really what gets the proposal kind of started. We've already had a couple submissions come through for next year, which is pretty exciting. So I know the form is working, so that's good news. But if you go through the form and you have any questions, and I don't have a screenshot of what the form looks like, but you can go at your own leisure. if you have any questions about completing the form or what the questions mean, feel free to reach out to me directly and I can help you, walk you through it, and we can start working together on getting the proposal done.
Well, can you give maybe a flavor for the kinds of things faculty should be thinking about, Megan, before they start a proposal?
Think about if you're going to be cross-listing your course with any other departments. Make sure you get department chair approval for these proposals. Start that conversation within your academic department. Get an idea of how many students maybe you feel comfortable bringing abroad, because we'll need that to start looking at budgetary considerations and itinerary considerations. Have a general idea of your itinerary items, because we'll need that in order to develop a budget. We can put a program together without too much problem, but we can't really market it to students if we don't have a per student cost, associated with that. Start thinking about entry requirements to the country. If there's visa requirements, if students will need to apply for a visa, we'll need to know that information as well. These are all things, as you go through the proposal, you can kind of see what the questions are and start making some notes about items you'll need to start research on. And so that when you go to sit down to actually do the proposal, you'll have as much information as possible. We do have some deadlines posted on the proposal itself. So I know for Q2, which would be travel in January 2024, we indicated that the deadline to propose is on January 15th, which is the end of this week. So that's pretty quick. But we can also be a little bit flexible with those deadlines as well. So, don't panic. We're willing to work with you. Obviously, more information is sooner the better. But if you just start looking through and have questions, feel free to reach out and we can work together on that.
Yeah, and we're pretty well connected, but we may not be where you want to go. And so from my experience working with faculty on this for many years, a lot of times faculty have a great idea and they really don't have a connection. Some of those have turned into great programs, meaning they don't have a contact yet on the ground. And I, with sort of the exploration process and with enough time, we develop those, either professional network of yours or ours or what have you. So you don't have to, like Megan was saying, you don't have to know everything up front, but the more you know, the quicker the process will go. And at least if you tell us as much that you do know about when you can travel, so forth, that's fewer things we have to resolve. And again, that means your program will get organized, costed, and mounted for promotion more quickly. And that's often what faculty are trying to get. So it's really kind of an iterative process in a lot of cases. I mentioned travel grants. Going forward, my final point there about program management and offering, less is more likely for next year. A need for balanced and diverse offerings with less overlap. I have seen, again, coming out of COVID, I make no assumptions about anything. And I have seen, I'll offer a great number of excellent proposals for Italy. I have received no proposals for England, for London even. So I don't know why. I think we're still kind of feeling our way coming out of COVID about who wants to do what and where. So I find myself in conversations like this, encouraging faculty where I see there is a need. I mentioned again, London. London is really open right now. And by the same token, I've had to tell some folks, hey, if you're thinking about Italy, just know I already got 2 this year. And we got to think maybe about a 3 to 5 year plan for this country so we don't oversaturate one location. So things like that are happening. Whereas before COVID, quite honestly, it was a pretty free market. Faculty could propose, we would run programs, and we would see where the students would go. And usually programs ran. Want to be a bit more cautious right now. Okay, any more slides? No, that's us. Is that it for the slides, Megan? I forget. Oh, budget and financial issues. So I guess one of the things we want to stress, this is probably more for the proposal process in particular, is budgeting and discretion. Again, it used to be there was a lot of, I don't want to say freewheelingness, but there was a certain entrepreneurial zeal to these programs. We do need to be a bit more careful right now. Revenue and budgeting issues are crucial all across the institution. Also, ways of paying things have become a bit more tight, not just within Oswego and SUNY, but I'm noticing it worldwide. So let's just make sure we budget as clearly as possible. And if you do seek some discretion about on the ground spending, that we really know in advance what you're thinking. Second bullet, similarly, for faculty purchases, in the past, sometimes faculty would make their own bookings, make hotel reservations, buy entrances in advance, and depending on the wherewithal of that individual, we permitted that. We really want to minimize that going forward. It doesn't mean that faculty won't have to take care of some of that on the ground or in advance, but to the extent that we have it organized within our department through a provider organization, third bullet, for example, it just keeps things much more manageable for us in this unusual post-COVID time. Special requests, we always get them. And I say to folks who have done this for a long time and for people who are considering it new, this has to work for you too. This is a big undertaking. Taking a group of young people abroad is a lot of work. It's gratifying work. It's immensely positive for them and for us too, but it is work. And so to make it something that you can do on a sustainable basis, you may have a request. You may say, I'd like to stay on extra in that country and do some research or do some site visit for a program next year. Talk to me about that. We can accommodate requests like that. I may need to bring my children. I may need to bring someone else with me for this to work. Let's talk about that. As long as it doesn't cost the institution and there are well-worn ways to make sure of that. That makes sense to me, especially if it helps you build this into your life in a sustainable way. Okay, so we remain open to that. Deviations of flight might be another example. You want to go somewhere else after the program, for example. So let's talk about those. We still entertain those. Travel advances from OIP. Those of you who've done this before, you remember that faculty travelers used to get a travel advance from our department. We're in the process of shifting or attempting to shift to the more typical college issued travel process, but we're right in the middle of that right now. We want to make sure that those travel cards work overseas or in all cases work. We'll make sure we have backup plans. Bottom line is no faculty member is to lose on this. We still cover your travel costs. We still cover your flight costs. We cover the program, and that includes your travel costs too. But the ways we pay for those, we're trying to be as tight and organized as possible. I guess the only no-nos would be, just remember, no business class flights, no alcohol, no paying for family members' expenses. But otherwise, if you put a program proposal together, there's not many restrictions on what you can't do, okay? As long as it's academic related. All right, I guess we're done now, Megan. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. Good job. So I guess I'll throw it open now for questions here or online.
Yeah.
I have one. I'm just kind of looking at the proposal. So in regards to like lodging, so if we weren't going to go through like Kappa or something else, and this was something we wanted to do here, it says kind of know your program specialist. Is that someone here
Megan.
on campus? It's Megan.
Megan.
Okay.
That's Megan. Yep. Megan's your go-to. Oftentimes, I mean, she and I right across the hall, we work very closely. You know, if it's a question, you know, maybe more of an academic matter or a real question about, you know, financial issues beyond the norm, you know, she'll know to kick that to me anyway. But from my standpoint, when it comes to like, what do I need to make sure of? Megan alluded to this before. Faculty who are untenured sometimes want to know, you know, where does this fit in? So I want to make sure for the institution to know what you're proposing to do. How does this fit into your career? For faculty who are more senior, sometimes they don't see the need to talk to their department chair or dean at this point. I understand that too. So we get to that, you know, level of precision as needed. Yeah.
John, this is Richard Metzger from the art department. When you mentioned briefly Q1 Thanksgiving model possibility, what does that mean and why did you say it?
Mostly because there's time. You know, I like to look at the whole calendar as usable. And when Thanksgiving break was officially 2 or 3 days, it just doesn't seem viable for an international program for me. But now that it's a full week, You know, in that if you're planning to go, you know, I guess if you're planning to go to Ottawa, you know, I suppose you could do that in 4 days, pretty good. But if wherever else you're going, you're going to kill at least a day in the travel. And then you add time zone differences to that, it may be more. So by the time you get on the ground, you know, you might have, for a spring break program, you may only have 5 days. And so how could you do that over Thanksgiving break? That was our logic in the past. There just wouldn't have been enough time. Now, I haven't really thought through what a Q1 program would look like in terms of particularly for first year students, but I can imagine, I'm willing to try with someone who's interested. We also could do a fall semester course with a week's travel over Thanksgiving. That's occurred to me as well. So this is I guess the essence of the proposal process. If you're thinking about it, you know, let's talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Another question I had, Josh, was, is there an advantage to doing it, having a course in the fall or spring semester, doing it that way and then traveling? Because, you know, or hopefully you would be able to fill the course, or is there an advantage to doing it that way versus like summer or winter session?
Time wise. Well, I remember, I'll use Elizabeth from your department. She wanted to go to Australia. You know, summer is now.
Yes.
So it's a great time to go to Australia. So there are some basic issues like that. And we've run other programs to the Southern Hemisphere, to Argentina and Chile and South Africa. So I think weather is an issue. I know when, I'm blanking now on which program it was, but I was talking to someone about running a program in, you know, I think it was to the art program to Beijing that we proposed. And the idea of going there in January for winter session was really untenable given the weather. You know, you're not going to go to the Great Wall in January. You'd be freezing, you know. So even March was a little dicey. So I think weather issues actually are something to think about in that regard. In terms of academic planning, there needn't be, right? There need not be any difference. I just have sensed, Megan, you've seen this as well, that we seem to get a lot more proposals for Q3 and Q4 because there's more time to plan, prepare, and market them. To get a fall program costed out and marketed, you really got to, like she was saying, you know, ideally we would know next week for spring, for fall courses. So there's time to promote it and get it on in the registration system for fall. And then you got this whole dead summer, right? So the spring programs just give you more time, I guess. Megan, any thoughts on that?
No, I think deadlines are the big concern. There's some, you know, background concerns, you know, that are more administrative in nature in terms of registration and making sure students are registered in study abroad sections of courses. So that's one thing that just needs to be, you know, thought of when doing optional travel courses in the fall or the spring. Students need to be in the travel section, so they're cross listed, non-travel and travel. But those are just administrative things that we would talk through and work through. The big thing is marketing the programs, especially if they're new programs that students aren't aware of, by talking to their friends, just making sure you give yourself enough time with those proposals to get students interested and spread the word, because that's really what it's all about.
I'm going to ask a question because I see Maggie Rivera and I see Sheila Cooley on the call. We've talked a lot about faculty and courses, and that's been really the bread and butter of this type of program. But we have had really good programs that are out of the business school, for example, that are research symposia, where students have done research papers in advance and then go present with students from, in this case, it was from Shanghai, China, at a conference. We were going to have from the art department a ceramics program where students were going to make ceramic art and present it in Beijing. So experiential programs are encouraged. Maggie, I think you used to be part of the service programs abroad that used to happen. I don't think they're happening right now. So if you have an idea for something that's more like a site visit to a business or to for project work or service work, please consider those as well. Those have been extremely powerful in the past.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
I have a couple questions. Hi. One is, how scheduled out in these proposals, like how packed or how many hours of like a travel day get scheduled out? And do you have to hit a certain number of hours in order to fulfill the credit needs of the students? Like, do you need to see at least like 4 scheduled hours per travel day, or do you see like things very densely
A
scheduled?
really good question, Kristen. You know, I'll use the quarter course model. So if we're supposed to have 35 to 40 hours of contact time for a 3-credit course, the quarter course model that has been most popular is where the professor meets, say, once a week during those 7 weeks on campus for an hour, hour and a half. That'll get you 10 hours right there. And then you've got what, 25 to fulfill over a week. So if you do the math, you're going to have probably way more contact hours than you need. All right. Even if you only met 3 hours a day, you'd probably have met that. But more realistically, I think, you know, I'd say at least not just half a day, but maybe, you know, the morning and into the afternoon, then give them a break. If it's kind of a city program, allow them some free time and some rest time after lunch. And you throw in some evening activities during the week, you'll probably have met your contact hours. I think on a human level, you're right to ask it, because you don't want to program the students 24/7. You know, you don't need to, but that would probably wear them out. So yeah, maybe as a roughly 5 hours a day, that'll probably be 4 to 5 hours a day. It'll get you the contact time you need, but also it's more realistic. And some faculty build in a free day, you know, at the end of the program with some guidance.
Quick question. Is there a list of countries that's recommended not to travel to? Just for any kind of purposes?
No, not really. This is where
Ukraine might
I
not be
got to remember not to be as entrepreneurial as I used to be, Christina, but we have run programs in places that, you know, others may not. We've had a successful run of programs to Cuba, to Myanmar, places with that. No, not Ukraine. No. I will say this, that SUNY step that I mentioned before, I think they're trying to get at that very thing. I think they're trying to make sure that if SUNY students in general are going somewhere that, say, is on a State Department travel warning list, that there better be a big conversation about that. You know, so I think probably the safest list to look at would be the State Department travel warning list. But I will tell you that there are places that we have gone to on that list as well. But the more likely thing would happen would be, you know, an extended conversation with us about what you're intending to do and the resources you need for that.
Thank you.
Yep. Anywhere in mind that you want to share?
I'm really interested in looking at something along the border in Mexico, from a social justice perspective, and maybe looking at border facilities. Mexico is one of the safest and one of the most dangerous places at the same time. And so I was just curious if there was
a great example. Yep.
Any list out there of anybody that, you know,
I would say let's not think in terms of where we cannot go, but the fact that you've already identified that's where our conversation would start, right? Where are you hoping to go? What are we going to build in terms of a structure? What resources do we have, or can we bring to bear on that to make sure if we do go that it's safe? But most faculty proposing, I think, already have a good idea of that. So, but no, I think that'd be a great program, Christina. Any new folks also interested in sharing what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, I would love to make a trip to Hong Kong.
Great.
But because I'm a music faculty,
Great.
think about the subject area. It could be a cultural trip plus some music, or like the local heritage.
Yeah. No, that we
performance or something, would that be okay? Like the symposia, like your example symposia presenting. and
Yes.
stuff, Like if we had a performance.
to attend or to make a performance.
Yeah, to bring.
That would be great. Yes, we did that in Japan with when Mahoka was here.
Mhm.
And the intent in the art project to Beijing was to have an art exhibition at the end of that trip. So most definitely, yeah. What are you thinking in particular?
Because we There's a really interesting book written by a magistrate back in when we were under British rule,
Uh-huh.
and he's a theater person.
Oh,
He can
great.
Make a short kind of play.
Oh, I think that'd be
with
wonderful.
That kind of in context. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
we could engage music and all kinds of other stuff. That'd be a fun thing to do. My question was maybe going off of that. You talked about site partner and program partner.
Yep.
Are these just tour companies who are there, or could they also be an institution to host students in the classroom and dormitories?
All the above, all the above, all the above. Now, so for example, if you proposed or wanted to talk about, and that's probably the way to go for a new program and location, have a conversation first. I can tell you right now, we have no program partners in Hong Kong,
Mhm.
no university partner,
Right.
and not a study abroad
Right.
company or tour provider. So that's a place where we don't have a partner.
Mhm.
But you may know somebody,
Yeah, I
right?
would
In
truly
which
would
case
like to get it.
we have, as a university, we have signed MOUs, and I think Jessica and Minjong are thinking about that for the Netherlands. Their university partner in the Netherlands came through their COIL project. It was not a partner university we had previously, but we signed an MOU. So we can find those partners with your help, or with even with our own networking.
Right.
We may need to sign a contract or an MOU with that institution so that it's official. And that's when the discussions of maybe using their dorms would come up.
Yeah,
Things like
'cause
that.
That'll be
Yep.
a lot cheaper. And
Definitely,
more manageable.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Great idea. Very good idea.
Be fun for the students too.
Hello. Well, we're past 2:50. I'm not sure if we have to stop or,
Well, we do have a session starting at.
Okay.
4:30, So,
but
but if there's any last minute questions or ways to get in contact.
mhm. All right. Well, I felt all year that things were starting to percolate out there and bubble. And this is a good group and really good questions and discussions. So I look forward to more as we go on. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
You too.
Okay.
Couple people were a little in and out.
That's okay. So I know, so Amanda, and we met briefly at breakfast.